Today I'll be reading chapter 23 of Rump, the true story of Rumpelstiltskin. Chapter 23 is called Going Crazy. I woke to hushed voices in the dark. Where was I? Who was there? Was I in danger? My heart pounded, and then I remembered. I was with the wool witches, my aunts, my mother's sisters. They had just told me how she died and why I was the way I was, and they had told me my name, Rumpel. My aunt's whispers carried from the opposite corner of the room. I couldn't see them, but I strained to hear their voices. He's not telling us something, whispered Hadel. What would you have him tell us? Anna died when he was just a baby. He knew nothing of her troubles. Anna died, but that doesn't mean her trouble died with her. If she was in a rumple, oh, stop. She was not trapped in a rumple. You don't understand, said Hadel. If she was in a rumple when the boy was born, the magic wouldn't have died with her. It would affect her child, too. You think the boy is in a rumple too? Matilda asked. Oh, don't be ridiculous, hissed Ida. He probably has a gift just as Anna did. We could teach him our work, only this time... No, said Hadel in a hushed whisper. That would only bring trouble for all of us, and besides, who knows what he is running from? Silence passed for a minute, and then Ida spoke. Do you think he came to us for help? Hadel spoke gravely. A rumple is deep magic. If it has been the boy's state since birth, it would be all the stronger. The knowledge must have tortured Anna, said Matilda. Oh, how she must have suffered. She deserved it, said Hadel. Shame, Hadel, snapped Ida. No one deserves such suffering. No one. Perhaps we should question him, said Matilda. He would tell us if he wanted us to know, said Ida. Let him be. Don't we have a right to know? If he's running from something, it will catch up to him. You can't hide from a rumple. But he's so small and young, said Ida. We must be able to help him. We couldn't help Anna, said Matilda. There was nothing for us to do. Who knows what the boy will do to us, said Hadel. They all fell silent then and didn't speak anymore. Soon I heard the rhythm of their snores, but I stayed awake for a long time, thinking over their words, thinking on one word, a name, Rumpel. I was certain now, Rumpel was my name, because that's what I was. This was why I could spin the gold. This was why the trolls could smell so much magic on me. I was born in the magic, trapped inside of it. What had been my mother's purpose in giving me such a name? Was it a warning, a cry of despair? Or maybe just the cold, hard truth. Matilda said there was no help for a rumple. Had the witch of the woods known about rumples? Did my aunts know about stiltskins? If I found one, could it still set me free? And would my aunts even allow me to stay? I might bring danger to them, as they said, but I had nowhere to go. These were my mother's sisters. They were the only family I had in the world. I wrapped the blankets tighter around me, trying to feel warm and safe, but I only felt alone, shivering with fear. I wished more than anything that I were back on the mountain with Gran, sitting by the fireplace, telling me stories about other people's magic troubles. My aunts were talking again when I woke the next morning. They sat around the table in their chairs, Hadel in the blue, Matilda in the violet, and Ida in the yellow. That must mean the green chair had been my mother's. When my aunts saw me, they grew quiet. Hadel very deliberately inspected my pile of hay, as if I might have turned it to gold just by sleeping in it. Ida handed me 2 slices of bread for breakfast. Did you sleep well? She asked with a searching look, as if she were trying to see the rumple that bound me. Yes, thank you, I said, taking the bread and sitting down in the green chair. No one spoke another word for the rest of breakfast. My aunts busied themselves with their work, baking bread, combing wool, and sweeping the dirt out the door. When I offered to help with the chores, Ida warmed considerably, and she was delighted when I said I could milk a goat. She handed me a bucket. Eloise is grazing in the back. Eloise? The goat, of course. Her name is Eloise. I never heard of an animal with a name. Calling our goat Milk and our donkey Nothing was strange enough, but giving an animal a name you would give a human was unheard of. Haven't you? Asked Ida. How silly! How can you expect them to give us any respect or work if we don't give them a proper name? Common sense. I thought she was crazy until I milked Eloise. She filled the bucket to the brim. Milk couldn't have filled an inch. Maybe Nothing would have been a little less ornery if I'd given him a proper name. He probably didn't like being called nothing any more than I liked being called Rump. That night, I sat with my aunts again as they worked. Ida was weaving the same tapestry from the night before, and she was forming pixies with her threads. I could almost hear their squeals and giggles. Batilda was knitting something different tonight, something with green fabric, though I couldn't tell what it was. Hadel sat in a dim corner spinning, but her wool glowed as it wrapped on the bobbin so it shone through the darkness. My fingertips tingled as I watched, like they itched to spin. I curled my fingers into tight fists, trying to crush that feeling out of me. Hadel looked up, her big eye boring into me. I turned back to Ida. "Can you tell me more about how it works?" I asked Ida. Ida smiled, full of delight, like she'd been waiting her whole life to show someone and explain what she could do. "Think of drawing water from a well. You pull the magic inside of you as one might pull the water up from the well, slowly and steady. You try to measure what you can do on your own, and then you imagine what you would like the magic to improve. Then you pour the magic from your fingers right into the threads. Not too much, though, just a little spark." Her hands moved quickly over the loom, pulling threads in and out, the colors swirling and shimmering. "Where do you pull the magic from?" "Everywhere," she laughed. "Magic is everywhere, in the air, in the ground, in fire and water, in the stars and clouds and the sun. The sun is bursting with magic. You pull it from all around you." "How?" I asked. "Like you pull air into your lungs." "What if you pull too much in?" "Well, Ida hesitated. "You just push it back. You can feel it when it starts to overwhelm you." "But how do you push it back?" She looked confused. I could tell she was trying to explain something she had always known how to do, but didn't know exactly how she did it, like seeing or smelling. "You just push it back." "And what happens if you don't push it back? What if you let it overwhelm you?" "Then you get into trouble, like your mother," said Hadel in a gruff voice. I didn't ask any more questions. I studied my aunt's work very intently for the next few nights. Mostly I wanted to watch Hadel, to see her pull the magic in and push it back as she spun, but she was difficult to watch because that big eye of hers always caught me with a cold stare that made me shiver. So I watched Ida and Batilda work instead. I focused on their fingers, trying to see how the magic came in, but I saw nothing. Although there were no sparks or flames, it all looked like magic to me. I tried to forget about spinning gold, and the next week Ida and Batilda helped to take my mind off things by surprising me with new clothes, 2 sets of them. Who besides nobles and kings and princesses owned 2 sets of clothes? Ida wove the fabric on her loom and then cut and sewed it, brown and blue woolen pants and 2 shirts. Batilda presented me with 2 knitted sweaters, one with many colors interwoven, and one green, bright but somehow calm, like spring on the mountain. The green was my favorite. "Hadel spun that green just for you," said Ida. "Thank you," I said. Hadel grunted. "It's the color of your eyes." "You have your mother's eyes," said Batilda. "So we hope it's a good surprise," said Ida, emphasizing the rhyme, which made me smile. I guessed rhymes must run in the family. As I folded up the sweater, I wondered what my mother had been like, how she smiled and laughed. Did she make up rhymes too? My aunts rarely mentioned her, and when they did, it was always with sadness, or in Hazel's case, anger. I imagined that my mother had looked a lot like Ida with her black hair and merry smile. "Do I look anything like my mother?" I asked her. "Besides my eyes, that is." Ida shook her head. "The rest of you must look like your father. I'll wager he was handsome." "I never knew him either. He died before I was born in the mines." "Then who has been caring for you all these years?" "My gran, but she's gone now too." Ida's eyes swam with tears. "Oh, you poor thing. Nothing sad should ever happen to you again." And she squeezed me so tight I started seeing sparks. I liked Ida, but I wasn't sure I liked all the crying and squeezing girls seemed so fond of. I missed Red. After a few weeks, my aunts became less wary of me, and we settled into a routine. Ida was the sweetest toward me, and she made sure to put huge amounts of food in front of me, which I ate and ate. Batilda was kind but quiet, and Hadel stayed as far away from me as possible. If I ever came near, her big eye got bigger, and her squinty eye crinkled up like a knot on a tree. She seemed to think I was contagious, and I never forgot her words, "You can't hide from a rumple." The spring turned to summer, and instead of spinning and weaving and knitting by fires, my aunts did their work by open windows, waiting for a breeze to come in. The problem with open windows was the pixies. "Oh, these pixies!" said Ida, brushing a green-haired, fuzzy-winged pixie off her loom. "I do think they are worse this year." "Yes," said Hadel, and she eyed me as several pixies rested on my shirt. "Why do pixies like it here so much?" I asked innocently. "They like the bright colors," said Batilda. "Color and shine are the next best things to gold for a pixie, so we usually have more than our fair share." She swatted one away. "But they've never been quite this bad." I now had 3 pixies fluttering around my head. Ever so faintly, I heard one of them chanting for gold in its tiny voice. I hoped my aunts didn't notice. It became my job to shoo the pixies away. I waited by the window with a rag, flicking it at them every time they came near. They usually laughed, and it became a game, but sometimes I'd give a pixie a good whack and it would flip through the air and fly away topsy-turvy. I kind of enjoyed it. On cool days, when the windows were shut, I would help my aunts with their work. Batilda had me hold her yarns so they wouldn't tangle as she knit, and sometimes I would arrange Hadel's yarns according to their shades. Helping Ida was my favorite. She'd let me pick colors for her loom or suggest a picture she could put into a tapestry. I suggested trolls once, but she didn't like that idea, so I asked her to make an apple tree. When she finished, it looked so real I almost thought I could reach into the tapestry, pluck an apple, and take a bite. It looked just like the magical apple tree in the troll's forest. Ida and I made rhymes as we worked. She was clever with her words, and we tossed the rhymes back and forth. This one was my favorite. "In yonder there lived 3 lovely witches, who spun and wove and sewed little stitches. Together they made me a new pair of breeches, just the right size with no snags to cause itches. But don't let the witches make straw into riches, because witches' riches cause glitches." Ida and I got so used to speaking in rhyme, sometimes we didn't even realize we were doing it. "There's a pixie on your head." "You must see a thread." "I'll swat him away." "Please don't delay." One morning, when I tried to pull my pants up, they rose above my ankles. "My pants have shrunk," I cried to my aunts. I danced around in them. They were tight and uncomfortable. Aunt Ida laughed and then cupped her hands over her mouth. "Nothing happened to your pants," said Hadel. "You did that yourself." "I didn't shrink my pants." Ida shook her head and laughed. "Robert, look at yourself. You grew." I stopped hopping and almost fell over. What?" "For all you eat, how can you be surprised?" said Hadel. "A cow can't eat as much as you." I stared down at my feet with the pants hanging a few inches above my ankles, then glanced over at Ida. When I had first come, I barely reached her chest. Now my nose was level with her shoulder. "But I don't grow," I said in disbelief. "You do now," laughed Ida. "Eat your oatmeal before it gets cold." I was excited and confused. I had grown. Was it because I knew the rest of my name? That must be it. I was so happy at the thought I almost forgot about everything else. The spinning, the gold, the rumple, and Opal's promise to me. Somehow the growth made me think other things had changed too. Maybe I wasn't as trapped anymore. That morning I ate 2 bowls of oatmeal, filling my belly to bursting. I could almost feel myself growing. I was halfway through a 3rd bowl when Ida spilled her gossip from the markets. "The new queen is with child," she said excitedly. I choked on my oatmeal, coughed, and spit it out. "Hope he's not as big an oaf as his father," grumbled Hadel. "Who says it will be a boy?" asked Ida. "Perhaps we shall have a little princess." My stomach clenched, and I pushed away my oatmeal. My aunt's conversation faded from my ears as a strange feeling came over me. Inside me, I felt little threads growing and spreading and knotting together, tangling me up and binding me tight. It was the rumple, my curse. The threads stayed tangled tight inside me all day. My only hope was to keep myself hidden so I wouldn't find out when the baby was born. If I never heard of the baby being born, I might not need to take it. My aunts were far from the kingdom. They didn't get little news, but they got big news, and a royal baby was big news. There was no way that I could avoid hearing of the baby's birth while in the company of other people. I would have to leave and go far away. I would have to live alone. It should have been a happy day. I had grown, but all I could think was, I am growing crazy.